In this edition of Southern Newsweek, Dunedin's historic prison building gets a slight makeover, a call goes out for Kiwis to continue donating blood, and a new initiative in Queenstown is encouraging residents to keep shopping locally. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Hannah Wilkins. Dunedins Old Prison is having its frontage restored with new gate pillars and wrought iron fencing. The aim is to make the building look like it did when it was built 126 years ago.
New gates for an old building. The frontage of Dunedin's former prison is set to look a lot smarter with these replica gate pillars and wrought iron fencing for its frontage. Dunedin Prison Trust Chair Virginia Nichols says the work is just one of many steps being taken in restoring the former institution to what it was designed to look like by architect John Campbell.
These were taken away from this building, we don't know why, but we're bringing them back as much as we can and for the way that they were in the 1890s.
The new gate pillars are based on photographs of the original prison frontage, and they've been built by local stonemasons Wainwright and Company. The work concludes the second stage of renovations to the prison, which has cost $700,000, raised from 12 different trusts. Much of that money has been spent replacing the 15,000 slates on the building's roof, and Nichols says every effort along the way has been made to use the skills of local workers.
So everything's done here in Dunedin, of course, Oamaru stone from Oamaru. And no, we use all local craftspeople, and the tiles and things on the building, of course, we bought those in from Spain. So we try and get them as much as we can or as close as we can to what it was like, of course, when the building was first built.
Nichols says the Prison Trust is busy gathering information about the former institution's background, which will be turned into descriptive displays within the building.
Working on the story component of the building as well. There's some pretty sad stories and some sad tales, and it's quite important that we collect that history and we share that history with our community, and so that's why we're working on that concurrently with the building.
It's hoped the restoration of the gate frontage will be largely completed by early next month. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The Blood Service says COVID-19 had a major impact on the number of people donating blood and plasma. But that hasn't changed the need, with one of the country's top lab scientists meeting a leukemia sufferer recently who is alive thanks to receiving blood products.
Bonded by blood. This morning, New Zealand Institute of Medical Laboratory Science President Terry Taylor met Oamaru man Wayne Sutton, who's in recovery from a near-fatal bout of leukemia, although the pair do have history of sorts.
We've almost got a bit of a connection because I was actually in the diagnostic team that diagnosed Wayne, so it's my fault, as he keeps saying. Yep.
The pair meeting at the New Zealand Blood Service's Dunedin Donation Centre to help the service recruit more regular donors.
It's very special to have a recipient and donor together because it really shows you that link of what is happening.
In a typical donation, 470 mils of blood is taken, which generally takes about 5 to 10 minutes. But the number of people donating blood has been hit hard by COVID.
During this Omicron period, there's probably been approximately 25% of our bookings have been cancelled or just no-shows.
She says there's strong demand for blood and plasma, which they call liquid gold, as it can be used in a variety of ways, regardless of a person's blood type.
The whole idea of that is you can do it a bit quicker than you can with normal blood donation, so I tend to do it every 3 to 4 weeks.
Wayne Sutton says without plasma he'd more than likely have not made it, as his life support was nearly turned off last year. However, he's thankful it wasn't, because he managed to meet a new family member.
While I was in Christchurch in ICU receiving blood products and numerous other things, I actually had a great granddaughter born, and I got home to meet her, and that was very, very special.
He credits his survival on receiving blood products, along with intensive chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant. He says he's one of the lucky ones, as only 5 out of 20 people survive leukemia. Lynn Rodica says the best way people can help is to sign up to donate. In Dunedin, the South Today.
A Christchurch man asleep in his bed had a narrow escape after an out-of-control speeding car ploughed into his house, stopping just metres from his bed. The man was freed by emergency services just before 4 a.m. in the morning.
It was a rude awakening early this morning for Amit Pal Singh after an out-of-control car crashed into his bedroom while he was sound asleep. Witnesses say a car travelling at speed failed to turn at an intersection, continuing straight on into the house on North Haven Road just before 4 this morning. Pal Singh says the car destroyed his bedroom, stopping less than 2 metres from where he was sleeping.
I'm sleeping on the bed, and the guy just hit the car in my room. I thought it's a fucking earthquake, because everything just dropped on me.
Jumping out of bed, he tried to open the driver's door, but it was jammed. Pal Singh says the young male motorist wasn't responding. Emergency services arrived soon after and were able to free the driver, who was transported to Christchurch Hospital in a serious condition. The crash also smashed through Pal Singh's bathroom and living room, destroying belongings including a laptop, watches, shoes and clothing. The accident has come at a huge cost. He'd been staying with friends at the property, so his possessions weren't insured.
Everything is gone, and I haven't got a single dollar from him. And still, it's not my fault. What can I do?
He says the property manager is helping them find a new place to live. In Christchurch, the South today.
A new initiative has been launched in Queenstown designed to help struggling businesses with staff shortages. 2 women have created a plan called Locals Keeping Queenstown Open, which is aiming to bridge the gap for local business owners in the resort town.
Bridging the gap for local businesses in Queenstown. 2 innovative Queenstown locals, Darrell Jenkins and Tori Keating, have started an initiative to assist businesses struggling with staff shortages. Named Locals Keeping Queenstown Open on Facebook, the duo are aiming to bridge the gap for local business owners around the town. Darrell Jenkins, Regional Manager for Hospitality New Zealand, says the idea came to her after seeing a post by Lone Star Queenstown owner Dave Gardner.
Really, Dave Gardner from Lone Star posted a couple of weeks ago on his Facebook page just asking for some friends to help out in the kitchen. And the response he got was amazing, and there were more offers than he had positions.
Gardner, after putting out the plea for a helping hand to the Queenstown community, had an estimated 20 volunteers helping out over the 2-week school holiday period. While Gardner wasn't too keen on putting out the notice for extra support, he says the response to the post was quite surprising.
Yeah, and we couldn't have survived it without the support we got from local community that just pitched in. Really, it was quite humbling and actually quite cool just to feel the vibe when it happened, because people never worked here before, and within a night they were superstars and they knew what they were doing. And
Tori Keating, co-owner of X Travel, says the main purpose of the cause is to pull the tourist town through until travellers with working holiday visas can return to the township in June.
And I just feel like it's an opportunity for us to just bridge that gap between now and when we actually start getting our holiday working visa holders back into the country.
Heading into the winter season, there are concerns for what the future will look like. However, with proof of the local community being able to tough it out through trying times, it does provide hope for the coming months. In Queenstown, the South Today.
Whai Yakane, still to come after the break in this edition of Southern Newsweek. Many train spotters were out in their droves last weekend in Otago, and some delicious recipes for seaweed are shared. A group of local historians are looking forward to uncovering what they believe is a huge gun buried at a popular Dunedin playing field. Otago Military History Group Chairman Peter Trevathan says his research leads him to believe a siege gun that New Zealand forces seized from the Ottoman army during World War I was buried under the Oval.
A First World War field gun so big it needed 14 horses to move it is buried under the Oval Sports Ground in Dunedin. The Otago Military History Support Group has enlisted a pair of University of Otago geologists to scan the area for signs of the gun, which was broken up and buried in 1936.
Trying to locate a German field gun that was brought back to New Zealand in 1918. It weighs 8 tonne, it's quite heavy, and it was buried somewhere around this area because it was too heavy to take away and scrap.
He says geologists Andrew Gorman and Hamish Bowman have scanned the area and found anomalies which may be pieces of the gun.
We've had the Otago University out scanning the area with a magnetometer, and they found 3 good hits. So next step is to probe the area and to see if there's anything below the ground.
Trevathan believes the buried gun was likely to have been captured in Palestine in September 1918 by the 2nd Auckland Infantry Battalion, as after World War I, many reserve units had taken artillery pieces home as trophies. These were generally removed from public display in the 1930s because of increasing anti-war sentiment. Trevathan hopes to restore the gun to its previous position, now overlooking the intersection of Princes Street and Andersons Bay Road. In Dunedin, the South Today.
This year's model train show in Mosgiel was a success, drawing 1,500 visitors last weekend. The event brought in exhibitors from across the South Island, with each and every miniature railway layout having a story behind it.
Watching model trains journeying through miniature landscapes. About 1,500 people, both young and old, visited the Dunedin Model Train Show at the Taieri Bowling Club rooms in Mosgiel over the weekend. There were 21 layouts on display, with the one created by local landfill worker Justin Cockcroft being possibly a New Zealand first.
I work at the landfill at Green Island, and I thought, well, all the time I've been at a train show in Dunedin, Christchurch, Timaru, Central. There's never been a landfill layout, so I thought I'd give it a go and put one in this year.
Complete with front-end loaders, the landfill took Cockcroft about 2 months of an hour or two every evening to get the display near completion. He says most modellers these days work with expanding foam decorated with manufactured plastic trees, shrubbery, cars and characters purchased online.
Some people might still do chicken wire and paper mache, but I've gone for expanding foam in a can, and it's easy to deal with. And it's not like polystyrene when you have to cut it and you get lots of wee balls and stuff, it's a easier product. And then spray the expanding foam, let it set, and then you can just cut it out with a knife, something like that, to make your hills and stuff.
The event attracted exhibitors from as far afield as Kaikoura. Father and son duo Andrew and Lachlan Snodgrass brought with them from Alexandra a massive layout taking up much of the back wall. A large portion of the exhibit was originally made by a local modeller who passed away some 15 years ago, and the Snodgrasses have got it back up and running again. Lachlan is in the process of rebuilding some of the display's beautifully detailed bridges.
A lot of the bridges, they're highly detailed. They're all made out of little strips of cardboard that have been glued together over many hours to get the nice detail.
A number of different scales were on display, with N scale being among the most popular, although the tiny Z scale, where a layout can even fit into a briefcase, is used by some of the younger modellers who have good eyesight. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The Marine Studies Centre in Dunedin has been uncovering some tasty ways to add seaweed to your diet. A recent workshop tested recipes for using the various marine algae growing along our coasts, which one expert says can be very tasty and nutritious.
Salty snacks sourced straight from the sea. Seaweed was the focus of a recent workshop at the New Zealand Marine Studies Centre, showing people how local seaweed can be picked and prepared for the table. Uzema Schmidt-Uchida is an enthusiast of the sea vegetables. She says seaweed is very versatile and New Zealand has a number of seaweed species suitable for eating.
There are beautiful kelp species like bladder kelps and bull kelps, but my favorite is wakame or andaria because it's an invasive species and I think it's okay to collect.
She was keen to demonstrate to locals just how easy it is to prepare seaweed so it's ready to eat.
Well, seaweed is very versatile, but the basic is just to blanch it in hot water only about 10 seconds or so, then it's going to change color, and now you're ready to use for salad and other things.
Uchida says Maori people have long understood the benefits of the aquatic plants.
Maori people particularly understand has a very strong connection to the seafood, and they know the seasons and the use of it for each different species. And I believe karengo is one of the most important species and known to have big protein contents, so very nutritious and yummy.
The workshop was part of the Wild Dunedin New Zealand Festival of Nature, with more than 100 events on offer during the week-long festival. In Dunedin, the South Today.
An Otago gold miner who died 140 years ago is finally being laid to rest this Saturday. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of the unknown miner 40 years ago and discovered his resting place had previously been disturbed by grave robbers.
Uncovering the history of the gold rush. Over the past few years, an archaeological team has been exploring the former gold rush boom settlement of Drybread near Otago. Today, nothing remains of the township, which in 1878 was home to 19 miners, a hotel, 2 stores and 4 houses. A year later, the area had all but been abandoned as miners moved elsewhere, and eventually much of the settlement was buried under sluice tailings from further uphill. But when Southern Archaeology Director Dr. Peter Pecci and his team were working to identify unmarked graves at the Drybread Cemetery 2 summers ago, something caught their eye. At a nearby area, among some old poplars, they spotted a site that 140 years ago could have been the location of a miner's dwelling.
We've come into the diggings themselves, the Drybread diggings, to try to look at the places where the miners were living and working. So the diggings are over here behind me, and we've been excavating a house site here amongst the old poplar trees.
The team uncovered a line of corrugated iron they initially thought might have come from a house or shed, but on closer investigation they now realise it was used as edging for a garden.
And we've come back, and what we've actually found is a fairly ornate front garden for a miner's house here in the diggings, with a beautiful curved gravel path with edging and so on. So unexpected, but quite an interesting find. We're quite happy.
Pecci says the garden speaks of the effort that someone put into creating a temporary but beautiful home among the gold diggings. Near Otago, the South Today.
Whai Akane, still to come after the break in this edition of Southern Newsweek. A new tourist venture relaunches in Dunedin, and remote-controlled steam kettles are put through their paces in Christchurch. Tēnā koe, welcome back. Southland teaching support staff are among workers campaigning for change in government policy around COVID leave payments. While many employees have access to the COVID-19 leave support scheme, educational support staff are having to eat into their sick leave if they catch COVID.
Teaching support staff work at schools across the country, helping assist teachers and students in the classroom. But Education Union NZEI Te Reo says many support staff are struggling financially as they're not entitled to the government's COVID-19 leave support scheme, which assists many other workers, including teachers and principals.
Currently we've got teacher aides that are missing out on being paid as a result of following the guidelines around staying home when you are sick.
The union has launched a petition calling on the government to extend the COVID cover that teachers and school managers can access to their frontline colleagues as well. Currently, support staff who get COVID or need to isolate at home have that period taken off their sick leave entitlement. Matilda school teacher aide Glenda West says that means support staff are scared of becoming ill.
The fear of getting COVID and not being able to work is real.
She says some staff are hiding symptoms or not testing so they don't risk not being able to go to work. The Minister of Education says if non-teaching staff don't have enough sick leave to cover a COVID absence, they are entitled to discretionary paid leave through their school. However, that leaves staff vulnerable if they get sick from a cold or any other reason later on. NZEI President Liam Rutherford says the stress is taking a toll on their workers and many support staff are struggling.
When they're getting COVID, they're actually having to they're having to take time away from their job, and as a result they're literally going without. I mean, these are people who have families, who have mortgages, who have power bills that have to be paid, and they're working out how do you make a smaller weekly income stretch even further.
West believes the government should be funding pandemic leave for workers like her, bringing them into line with their teaching colleagues.
The inequities are just wrong. We work with these students the same. They're vulnerable students, which therefore makes us vulnerable. My colleagues, many of them are solo parents that need their income.
Almost 8,000 people have already signed the union's petition, with the goal of hitting 10,000 signatures. Across the south today.
Archaeologists have uncovered a surprising detail during excavations of a former gold rush settlement in central Otago. They've discovered that one gold miner went to extra effort to turn their house into a beautiful home.
Uncovering the history of the gold rush. Over the past few years, an archaeological team has been exploring the former gold rush boom settlement of Drybread near Otago. Today, nothing remains of the township, which in 1878 was home to 19 miners, a hotel, 2 stores and 4 houses. A year later, the area had all but been abandoned as miners moved elsewhere, and eventually much of the settlement was buried under sluice tailings from further uphill. But when Southern Archaeology Director Dr. Peter Pecci and his team were working to identify unmarked graves at the Drybread Cemetery 2 summers ago, something caught their eye. At a nearby area, among some old poplars, they spotted a site that 140 years ago could have been the location of a miner's dwelling.
We've come into the diggings themselves, the Drybread diggings, to try to look at the places where the miners were living and working. So the diggings are over here behind me, and we've been excavating a house site here amongst the old poplar trees.
The team uncovered a line of corrugated iron they initially thought might have come from a house or shed, but on closer investigation they now realise it was used as edging for a garden.
And we've come back, and what we've actually found is a fairly ornate front garden for a miner's house here in the diggings, with a beautiful curved gravel path with edging and so on. So unexpected, but quite an interesting find. We're quite happy.
Pecci says the garden speaks of the effort that someone put into creating a temporary but beautiful home among the gold diggings. Near Otago, the south today.
A 57-year-old former coal mine worker has a few buses and a dream. The geologist by trade is looking to share his expertise with tourists. He hopes to chauffeur around in his shiny white behemoth.
You've got to start somewhere. The best foot forward approach of Harry Albert as he relaunches Geotourism New Zealand as part of his new transport company, Otago Coach Services.
Now that we're coming out of COVID, it's time to start looking to the future and to making plans, diversifying into other areas of the sector, and making tourism what it used to be before COVID.
The 57-year-old former miner has established the business and is looking at taking aim at internationally owned bus companies. He says his new venture is set to take on new workers soon. Bus driving doesn't usually command a large hourly pay rate, but he says his employees will be well reimbursed.
Well, drivers is always going to be a concern, especially for a business that's starting out. But I feel if you pay your drivers what they deserve instead of the bare minimum, then you'll retain those people that you require.
He says there's been a lot of upheaval in the local transport industry over the past 12 months, particularly after the closure of Otago Road Services. Albert hopes to fill the gap left by Otago Road Services before looking further afield.
Hopefully as the world opens up, we can look at expanding our tour base to Australia and Americas.
Albert's Otago Coach Services currently works with the University of Otago's Geology Department, taking students on field trips. Otago Coach Services has 2 staff at present, Harry Albert and driver Kim Hayward, but they're looking for more people shortly. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Members of the Christchurch Steampunk community converged on St Martin's recently, the biggest event on their local calendar. The event also attracted a number of interested onlookers, keen to find out more about the science fiction subgenre.
Racing teapots whizzed and crashed their way around St Martin's School on the weekend, as part of Christchurch's Keep Calm and Steampunk on market. The radio-controlled teapots had to navigate their way around an obstacle course.
The idea is to get around the course of obstacles, special obstacles, as fast as you can. And it's pretty exciting because there's all sorts of crashes and strange things happen.
Fashion and accessories, art and even a steampunk helicopter were on show at the popular event.
It's quite exciting. The audiences that come along just love it. It's a great atmosphere.
Inspired by Victorian-era industrialism, steampunk is a global design style where steam power still rules.
Steampunk is Victorian science fiction. Sort of, we imagine an alternate universe.
He says steampunk has really taken off in New Zealand over the last decade. Oamaru became the unofficial steampunk capital in 2016, after it made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest gathering of steampunks in the world. The town hosts an annual steampunk festival, which had to be cancelled this year due to COVID concerns. Despite that, steampunk enthusiasts are still planning to venture to Oamaru during Queen's Birthday weekend next month to make their own events. In St Martin's, the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news and videos from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz. And you can follow Channel 39 on YouTube to catch our news bulletins on demand. Have a lovely weekend. Nō reira, kia pai te po, ka kite anō.
Public interest journalism funded through New Zealand On Air.